Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Positive Proof Podcast. I'm your host, Parmis Najmi, and I'm so glad that you're here. If you want to listen to more episodes like this one on self-improvement, mindset, and wellness, go ahead and hit that follow button to join the family. Before I get into today's episode, I just want to ask you guys for a quick and kind favor, and that is if you haven't yet left a review, I would absolutely appreciate if you could do so. It helps so much to build this podcast and help it grow so that we can increase the positive impact we make and just overall make it a bigger community. Also, if you are looking for daily motivation, follow me on Instagram at Positive Proof Podcast, where I post daily quotes that serve as sweet daily reminders. And if anyone is wondering how to leave episode requests, you can actually send me your thoughts via the DM me your thoughts link in the description or via Instagram DM as well. Now, if you're new here, quick little intro about me is I am 26 years old, based in Toronto, and I started this podcast after a few big life shifts from leaving my 9-to-5, going full-time on a business with my boyfriend, and realizing I just had way too much to say about self-growth, relationships, and becoming the woman I actually want to be. So I'm really happy you're here. And with that, let's get into today's episode. Now, today we're talking about anxious attachment. This was actually a requested video, so thank you to the lovely lady who reached out to me on Instagram. And we're going to be talking about it not in a hyper clinical way and not just in the context of dating, but as a life pattern, one that wires you to chase people, chase reassurance, chase certainty, even when nothing is technically wrong. And you might already know you have anxious tendencies, or maybe this is the first time you're hearing that term and something in your body just goes, oh, that's me. Either way, this episode isn't about labeling yourself or fixing yourself. It's about recognizing a pattern that might be keeping you stuck and then learning how to gently interrupt it with more self-trust. So I'm going to walk you through 5 very real ways anxious attachment shows up, and more importantly, what to do with it. You are going to leave with new language for what you've been feeling and specific shifts you can start making today. Now, quick poll check-in for those of you tuning in on Spotify. I want you to scroll down and vote when anxious thoughts come up in your life. What's your go-to reaction? Do you overthink and overanalyze everything? Do you reach out too quickly and then regret it? Do you shut down and pretend not to care? Or do you feel frozen, kind of not sure what to do? Now take a deep breath and let's get into it. Starting off with section 1, we're going to be talking about the pattern of pursuit. So what anxious attachment feels like in real life. Now there's a specific kind of anxiety that doesn't always look like anxiety. It doesn't necessarily come with panic attacks or racing thoughts. Sometimes it comes dressed up as care, as attentiveness, as just checking in. It feels like a pull in your chest that says, reach out. Fix it, get closer, even if nothing's technically wrong. That's the subtle pattern of anxious attachment. It's not just about how you show up in relationships, it's about how your nervous system responds to uncertainty, to space, to not being 100% sure that you're emotionally safe. And it's so easy to miss because it masquerades as love, loyalty, or even just being thoughtful. But here's the difference. When you're anxiously attached, the desire to connect is fueled by fear, not ease, not joy, not trust. See, the moment there's a pause or a shift in tone or a delayed reply, your mind starts sprinting. You imagine worst case scenarios, you rewrite entire conversations in your head, and you start reaching not out of grounded desire, but out of pure panic. And honestly, I've been there more times than I can count. For me, it used to look like rehearsing texts over and over and over again. I would write something, delete it, rewrite it, and then stare at my phone wondering if it sounded like it was too much. I'm not gonna lie, I once spent 30 minutes editing a DM to a friend, not even a stranger or acquaintance, but a friend. And it wasn't about the message. It was about the fear that I might be perceived the wrong way and then lose the connection altogether. Or sometimes it would hit in conversations. So I'd be in a group setting, and if someone's tone shifted ever so slightly, I would immediately spiral. Like, did I say something wrong? Did I talk too much? Did I come off weird? I would replay it all later like a forensic analyst. That urge to fix what might not even be broken, that is what's called anxious attachment. It's not just I miss them. It's did I say something wrong? Are they pulling away? Are they mad at me? Did I ruin it? Or it's not, I care about this project. It becomes if I don't prove my worth right now, I'll be replaced. And if you're anything like me, you've probably already learned to hide it really well. It's like you're constantly trying to manage a fire that really no one else can see. And honestly, it gets really exhausting. But here's the truth. Anxious attachment doesn't just make you chase people. It makes you chase certainty, emotional clarity, proof, something you can hold on to that says you're safe, you're not being abandoned, and you're not too much. Now, that might look like over-explaining yourself, or apologizing for things that didn't really need an apology, or being hyper-aware of someone's mood and tailoring yourself around it, or doing that thing where you preemptively downplay your needs because you're scared of being a burden. This is what I call performative ease. You try to be the least inconvenient version of yourself in hopes that it makes people stay. But let's be honest, it doesn't actually feel easy, does it? Because beneath all of that is a scared part of you that's just trying to avoid pain, trying to avoid rejection, avoid the feeling of being dismissed, ignored, forgotten. And that part deserves way more compassion than it usually gets. So let me offer you this. If any of what I'm describing feels familiar, you are not needy, you're not dramatic, and you're not broken. You are just carrying a survival pattern that worked really well in environments where love just wasn't guaranteed. You learn to reach, to overfunction, to preempt loss before it happened. And you did that to stay safe. But just because it kept you safe then doesn't mean it's serving you now. So let's pause here. And instead of judging yourself for those behaviors, I want you to take a gentler approach. The next time you feel that urge to chase, to fix, to explain, to double text, I want you to ask yourself this very simple question. Am I reaching out because I'm grounded or because I'm spiraling? That one question can create just enough space for you to reconnect with yourself before outsourcing your safety to someone else. Now, your action step for this week, I want you to start a simple notes app log called Moments I Wanted to Chase. Every time you feel that anxious urge to fix, text, or over-apologize, I want you to log it. One line, no judgment, just build awareness around it. Over time, you're going to start to see the pattern before it hijacks your peace. See, you can't interrupt what you're not aware of. And this isn't about shutting down your needs. It's about learning the difference between true connection and anxious pursuit. The difference here is safety, and safety starts with self-honesty. Moving on to section number 2, we're going to talk about why you learn to chase. So the hidden origin of overfunctioning. Now, before we can shift a pattern, we have to understand why it exists, right? And that's what this section is really about, not just naming anxious attachment, but looking underneath it. So getting curious about how it formed in the first place, because most of us didn't wake up one day and decide to be overly sensitive or overly available or overly apologetic. That didn't happen by accident. That was adaptation. At some point, maybe early on, maybe not until your teens, you got the message that love wasn't something you could fully relax into. It was something you had to work for. For me, it happened with friends. It felt like something I had to earn. And I don't mean in a dramatic movie-level trauma way. I mean in those small, quiet moments where your emotional needs were met inconsistently. Maybe for you, one parent was warm and affectionate sometimes, but also unpredictable, loving when they were in a good mood and distant when they weren't. Or maybe you felt responsible for keeping the peace in your home. Or maybe you learned that being helpful, being quiet or being low maintenance earned you more connection, while expressing sadness or anger pushed people away. And here's the wild part. We internalize those lessons very fast. See, kids are incredibly smart, not logically, but emotionally. They scan for patterns. So what gets me attention? What makes people pull away? When am I safest? And without even realizing it, you start shaping yourself around that feedback. You learn how to read the room. You sense when someone's energy is off before they say a word. You become a master of emotional micro adjustments because that's how you survived. And when that's the emotional blueprint that you're working with, it makes perfect sense that as an adult, you might now associate love with performance. And you chase because you learned that love might leave. You overgive because you're terrified of being too much. You stay hyper aware of, tone, of silence, of subtle changes in someone's mood because at some point those shifts mattered. They told you whether you were safe or not. I'll be honest, this realization didn't hit me all at once. I had always tried to earn the love of friends when I was younger, with good energy, with care, with consistency, with attentiveness. And underneath all of that effort was the fear that if I stopped proving I was lovable, that I'd be forgotten. So that's the exhausting part of anxious attachment. It wires you to overfunction in your relationships. And you become the one who remembers everything, reaches out first, keeps the conversation alive. You accommodate before anyone asks you to. And then one day you look around and realize that most of your relationships rely on you doing the emotional labor, which creates more anxiety and more chasing and more resentment that you feel guilty for having. So how do we begin to shift that? Well, we start by gently separating love from labor, from proof, from perfection, from performance. So here's something I want you to try this week. And I say this knowing it will be uncomfortable, okay? Especially if you're used to being the one who holds it all together. I want you to pick one relationship where you've been overfunctioning, then pull back by 10%. Not in a passive-aggressive way and not in a test, you're not playing games, but in a self-honoring way. So that might look like not double texting, or not being the one to keep that chat alive, or not fixing something immediately, just pausing and creating space, seeing what happens when you're not micromanaging that connection. It will feel scary at first because your nervous system will likely scream, "You're being distant, they'll leave," but just give it time. Let your body learn that you're safe even when you're not overextending. If a relationship only exists because you're doing the work of two people, it's not secure, it's conditional, and you deserve more than that. Anxious attachment isn't just fear of being abandoned. It is a belief that you have to abandon yourself in order to stay connected. And that belief isn't your fault, but it's also not your future. And the more you practice pulling back, not to punish others, but to respect yourself, the more you'll feel that shift from fear to clarity, from performing to simply being. And you will be surprised how many people stay when you stop trying so hard to keep them. Moving on to section number 3, it's not just about love. Anxious attachment shapes work, friendships, and self-worth. One of the biggest myths about anxious attachment is that it only shows up in your dating life. Well, it doesn't. It shows up in how you write your emails, in how you tiptoe around feedback, and how you over-apologize in voice notes to your best friend. It's there when you feel like you have to earn your spot in every room, even after you've already been invited in. It's in that panicky urge to prove yourself, fix everything, or be easy to love, even in contexts when no one asked you to. Anxious attachment is a life pattern, not a romantic flaw. And the moment you realize that is when real healing begins. Because it's one thing to notice your anxiety in dating, okay? But it's another thing to realize you also chase validation at work, or you chase certainty in friendships, or you chase belonging in groups, or you chase predictability in your schedule. Because unpredictability makes your body feel unsafe, even when nothing is actually going wrong. So I remember this happening in a professional setting once. I was on a Zoom call with someone I really admired, and the conversation was flowing, ideas were being exchanged, everything was going great. But the moment that their tone shifted ever so slightly, maybe they were distracted or just had a lot going on, my brain immediately kicked into panic mode. So I was like, in my head, did I say too much? Was I being annoying? Did I just overshare? And before I even closed the Zoom window, I was already drafting a follow-up message to clarify, to reframe, to apologize for something that really didn't need an apology at all. But it was my inner child that had grabbed the wheel. Because anxious attachment doesn't wait for your logic to catch up. It operates through body memory, through survival instinct, through the part of you that's still scared that you might be too much or not enough or just one misstep away from being rejected. And it's not just professional spaces, it shows up in friendships too. You might feel hurt when someone takes too long to reply, but then blame yourself for caring too much. You might overfunction in group chats, sending the check-in texts, planning the hangouts, because if you don't, it might fall apart. You might feel like you're walking on eggshells with certain people, not because they've told you you're hard to love, but because your nervous system expects disconnection at the first sign of conflict. Sometimes anxious attachment even shows up in how you relate to yourself. So you chase doing over being. You chase productivity over rest. Certainty over curiosity. You only feel good when there's external proof, when there's likes, praise, progress, and when that proof disappears, you start to question your worth again. You crave evidence that you're enough, even though you're already breathing. So what do we do with all of that? Well, first, we name it without shame. That's what we're doing here. And second, we begin to gently separate emotional safety from external performance. So here's a very simple but powerful action step I want you to try this week. Pick one area of your life, whether it's work, friendship, or even daily routine, and I want you to ask yourself, where am I chasing certainty because I don't feel safe trusting myself? Maybe it's triple checking emails because you're scared of being misunderstood. Maybe it's planning every social interaction so you're never caught off guard. Maybe it's never saying how you really feel in a friendship because you're scared honesty will push them away. Whatever it is, see if you can choose one micro moment this week to pause instead of perform, to soften instead of chase, to tell yourself, I'm allowed to be here and I'm allowed to take up space. I am allowed to not have all the answers today. This is the small but radical shift. You stop proving and you start belonging to yourself first and then to the spaces around you. Now, the beauty of this kind of healing is that it's subtle, but it does snowball. You say one honest thing to a friend instead of buffering it, and you rest one day without guilt, and you speak in a meeting without over-explaining, and then suddenly your body starts learning, I don't have to chase to be safe. You're not just healing how you love others, you are healing how you hold yourself. Moving on to section number 4, we're going to talk about the loop that keeps you stuck and why being chill doesn't work. So this is the part that gets messy, right? Once anxious attachment takes root, it becomes self-reinforcing, like a feedback loop. You crave connection, so you reach for it. But then you don't feel fully met, so you start performing or pleasing or shrinking or apologizing for your needs. And because you've now abandoned yourself to stay connected, the connection doesn't feel safe. So you spiral again and chase again and call it caring. That is called the anxious loop. And it feels like this. I need closeness, so I reach out. And then I feel exposed and I regret it. And I try to fix it. And then I feel like a burden, so I pull back. I feel disconnected. I start to panic and I reach out again. See, it's exhausting. And if you're not aware of it, it can start to feel like this is just who you are. Intense, needy, overthinking everything. But I want you to hear this clearly. You are not too much. You are just stuck in a system that's running on autopilot. And most people, when they start to realize that their anxiety is pushing people away or that they're constantly in this loop, swing in the opposite direction. They go cold. They tell themselves, I just need to stop caring. I need to detach. I need to be low maintenance. I need to be unbothered. And listen, I get it. When caring feels dangerous, detachment feels like control. But that's not healing. That's just numbing. And you'll know you're doing it because it won't feel empowering. It'll actually feel very hollow and performed, like you're pretending not to care while secretly obsessing over why someone hasn't replied yet. That's the anxious avoidant loop playing out inside you. You become both the one who reaches and the one who runs. I've done this myself. I fully remember trying to convince myself that I was chill about a situation that was eating me alive inside, telling myself I didn't care, that I would outgrow it, that it was fine. But then I'd find myself rereading messages, analyzing tone, trying to guess what I could have said differently. I wasn't chill. I was just disconnected from my own truth. This is why the whole just be secure advice, it doesn't help. Because when you're anxiously attached, your nervous system doesn't feel secure. It feels wired for threat, even when nothing's actually gone wrong. And that's what we need to start healing. Not by becoming cold, but by becoming conscious. So here's the reframe that I want to offer you. Regulating isn't the same as repressing. You can still care deeply without losing yourself in the process. You don't need to stop feeling. You just need to stop abandoning yourself because you're feeling. That's the pivot. So how do we start breaking the loop? Well, it begins with slowing down the reaction, because the thing is, anxious attachment is really fast. The fear hits and then behavior follows. It's instant reach out, instant apology, instant plan to fix what might not even be broken. So here is your action step. Create a 24-hour rule for any emotionally charged reaction. If you feel the urge to send a big text or to apologize for being too much, or to clarify what didn't need clarifying, I just want you to pause. Just practice that. Wait 24 hours. That doesn't mean suppress. It means, write it down in your notes app, vent it to your journal, talk it out with someone who makes you feel safe. But the important thing is to give your nervous system the chance to regulate before you act. And here's the magic part. When you wait, you'll often realize you don't actually need to send that message anymore. Or if you still do, the energy behind it will be completely different. It's going to be more grounded, more clear, less, please don't leave me, and more, here's what I feel and here's what I need. That is emotional self-trust. Because anxious attachment doesn't just create chaos in your relationships, it robs you of your own clarity. It makes you second guess yourself constantly and then punishes you for being inconsistent. The antidote to that isn't perfection, it's presence. It's learning to stay with the discomfort of not knowing. It's realizing that the space between stimulus and response is where your healing lives. So if you've been trying to act secure but still feeling like you're faking it, maybe that's your sign to stop performing ease and start practicing self-honesty instead. You don't have to be unbothered to be healthy. You just have to be willing to pause long enough to respond from self-respect and not self-protection. That is what breaks the loop. Lastly, moving on to section number 5, we're going to talk about reclaiming safety. So the shift from external proof to inner grounding. So if anxious attachment is built around chasing people, validation, certainty, then healing anxious attachment is about learning how to stay. Stay with yourself, stay with discomfort, stay with not knowing and not spiral. And let's be real, it doesn't always feel empowering. A lot of the time, actually, it feels like grief. Grieving the years you spent outsourcing your safety. Grieving the way you had to confront yourself just to keep people close. Grieving the fact that sometimes you still feel like that little kid who's one misstep away from being unloved. But somewhere in that grief is where you get to build something new. And it starts small, so small that it almost feels invisible. It's the moment you don't reach out just to feel okay, the moment you feel the urge to explain yourself and instead pause. It's the choice to self-soothe, not because you don't want reassurance, but because you've realized that no one else's words will land if you don't believe them yourself. For me, this shift looked like learning how to ground before I speak, and that felt really weird at first. I had always been someone who reacted really fast, who sent the long text, who wanted closure right that second. But the more I practiced pausing, not suppressing, just, breathing and writing it out, feeling it without acting, the more I started to realize that I could hold the emotion. I didn't need someone else to fix it for me. And that was wildly freeing. Because the truth is, healing anxious attachment doesn't mean you'll never get triggered. It means you trust yourself to handle that trigger without losing who you are in the process. You stop needing proof because you start building internal evidence. You start noticing like, hey, I felt rejected and I didn't spiral this time. Or I asked for what I need and I didn't apologize for it after. Wow. Or even I sat with the discomfort of space and I didn't chase it away. That is the kind of proof that actually lasts. And let me be clear, this doesn't mean you have to become hyper-independent either. We need other people. We thrive in communities. Healing doesn't mean never needing reassurance again. It just means you're no longer dependent on reassurance to feel stable. You can want connection without confusing it for survival. So here is your final action step, something I still do, by the way, to this very day. I want you to create an inner grounding practice. This is a short list of 3 to 5 self-regulating actions that bring you back to your body when the spiral starts. And I want you to keep this in your notes app. So mine looks like this. Feel free to adjust as needed. On my list, I have stepping outside and feeling the air on my skin, putting my phone down for 20 minutes, even if I'm panicking, writing out exactly what I want to say, but not sending it, playing a calm playlist and stretching for 5 minutes, and reminding myself that I am safe even when I feel unsure. This sounds really, really simple, but when you practice it consistently, something changes. You start responding from inner stability and not inner chaos. And slowly, people and life will feel that difference around you too. You become the version of you who doesn't chase because you no longer believe you have to. You're not being dramatic, you're learning how to regulate. You're not being avoidant, you're creating space to respond consciously. And you're not being unlovable, you are rebuilding your relationship with yourself. And here's the most beautiful part. As you do this, you start attracting very different dynamics, healthier ones, calmer ones, relationships where you don't have to perform ease to be chosen, where you can be soft and still feel safe. And that's not a fantasy. That's what becomes possible when you stop looking for proof and start to embody the safety you've always deserved. Now, anxious attachment isn't about being broken. It's about being wired for closeness in a way that used to keep you safe. And the fact that you're now unpacking it and listening to conversations like this and choosing a new path, that is not weak, that is powerful. And just remember that healing isn't loud. Sometimes it looks like not sending the text. Sometimes it's just taking a deep breath before you react. And sometimes it's realizing that, you don't need proof right now. You just need presence. These patterns take time to unravel, so try to be patient with yourself and celebrate the tiny shifts, and know that the more you choose self-honoring responses, even when they feel unnatural at first, the more safety you start to build from the inside out. Now, if this episode resonated, I would love if you could send it to someone who might need it, or even just screenshot it and post it to your story and tag me at Positive Proof Podcast. You never know who's quietly struggling with this pattern too, and so your share might be what gives them language for something they've never named. As always, thank you for being here and thank you for showing up, not just to this podcast, but to your growth. And if no one has told you today, you're already worthy of love that doesn't require performance. You are already enough without having to chase. To everyone who made it this far, I appreciate you so, so much. And I can't wait to chat with you again in next week's episode. Lots of love, Parmis.